So we're looking at, for instance, Galatians 3. They touch on Galatians 3:19. The Torah was added because of transgressions. And so how do they view this passage? And then what would be perhaps, are they viewing it correctly? Or is this a misstep on their part?
That's a key verse in my reading of this book. They take Galatians 3:19, where it says the Torah was at. Why then the Torah? The Torah was added because of transgressions. Okay, and so they take these transgressions, they define it very specifically, and they don't offer any alternative. There's 6 or 7 ways that this has been read, and we think this is the strongest. There's no, because this is not written as a scholarly work. This is a book that's written just to tell people the way it is, right? Without giving any kind of fuzzy or presenting any place where there is argument or dispute. And they take it to be Israel's transgression. And so the book clearly shows, like, for example, the tzitzit, the commandment to wear tzitzit is the example given, that it was only after the sin of the spies that the commandment for tzitzit was added. Another is that the Levitical priesthood was created after the golden calf event. So in other words, Israel transgressed, and then Torah was added. And so the authors of this book take for granted that what Paul means in Galatians 3:19 by the Torah being added for the sake of transgressions, this book takes for granted that means Israel transgressing, and then God adding commandments on as a response to those transgressions. And so what happens is we end up with this accumulated body of extra laws that were added, all of which were only temporary. They were only temporary. And tzitzit, right, is the big example that's unpacked. And given the example they give, or the analogy, is that of a curfew for like a son who needs discipline. So they give a curfew until the son learns to be mature. Then they take the curfew away because the son has internalized the curfew and doesn't need the external command to be in place anymore. And they use that specific example to try to illustrate that the commandments are added after Israel sins. And if I make one more comment on that, Tim, because I'd like to hand this over to you. I think it's Richard B. Hayes' commentary, New Interpreter's Bible Commentary, Richard Hayes on Galatians. He says there's at least 5 ways that scholars have taken this added because of transgressions. And he lists this example, and he dismisses it, the one that this book offers. Now, of course, Dr. Hayes' commentary on Galatians is many, many years old now, at least a decade probably, so it precedes this book. But even Dr. Hayes' excellent commentary does not list what I think is the best explanation, which is the one that Tim gives in his commentary on Galatians, that how the Torah actually teaches us about substitutionary atonement, which this book, in another context, does say, without the Torah, we wouldn't know about substitutionary atonement. But they don't do it in explaining Romans or Galatians 3:19. Tim, I'll hand it over to you.
Well, I think the meaning of this verse in the context of Galatians 3 does hang on a word that it seems as though our authors are not that keen on talking about, and it's the word because. That's translated because. It was added because. It's the Greek word karen, which, if you look it up in standard lexicon, like the BDAG that we use, that's an abbreviation for Bauer, Art, and Ginrich, and Denker.
Denker, yeah.
Yeah. It's the standard Greek lexicon, and if you look that up, it says that it gives the goal or the purpose that it was given, that something happens. Now, let's take that in mind, and then ask this question: It says, Paul says, why then was the law given? Okay? Why then the law? And it says, but the word given is not there in the Net
Right.
Bible or in other places. Why then the law? But the point simply is that God had already made a covenant with Abraham, and we know that this covenant passes on to his descendants. And because it says at the beginning of Exodus, in chapter 3, it says, and God remembered his covenant that he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and he took note of, and I'm paraphrasing now, he took note of the burden that the Egyptians had placed upon Israel. And in fact, the first time that you have Israel being called, being used, the word Israel being used as the nation that God chose, was when he says, Israel is my firstborn. He's talking about the nation. Okay, so why the law then? And he says, it was because of transgressions was it added. Okay, it was added to what? Now, the book that's under discussion says, well, it was added later to what? I don't know. What did they say it was added to? But at any rate, it seems very clear that it was added to the promises given to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It was added to the Abrahamic covenant. We already know that the impetus for God intending to bring Israel out from underneath the bondage of Egypt was in order to be faithful to his covenant, which he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So it seems to me that when it says it was added to the Abrahamic covenant. You cannot separate the Torah given at Sinai, which is a covenant, from the Abrahamic covenant. The Abrahamic covenant relates to justification.
Don't miss any clips from Messiah Matters by clicking the subscribe button. Also, give this video a thumbs up and share it so other people can see it too.